Before we start discussing force commutation, we should go through some of the basics of thyristor. So to start with, in order to turn on the thyristor from off state, we need to provide a positive anode to cathode current, and which should be greater than latching current. And again, we have to provide a gate pulse, since thyristor is a form of bipolar transistor. It is a current control device. So we need to provide a gate current in order to turn this on. Again, in case of a resistive load, VAK must be positive in order to get a positive IAK. So once a thyristor is on, it stays on, or it's in a latching state if IAK doesn't drop below IH, no matter what is the condition of VAK or IG. So that's the latching state. It will stay latched if IAK is above IH. So the turn off condition is only IAK must be less than holding current. So the force commutation is basically the additional circuitry for this criteria to happen. Since in case of an AC signal, the thyristor will go through a natural commutation. So in case of a forced commutation, we will apply a DC voltage as opposed to an AC voltage. So there are some here are some methods for forced commutation. We will be discussing only few of them. First of all is self commutation. This is basically an LC circuit, and in case of an LC circuit, if we solve the KVL equation, we will get something like this, and this is a differential equation. If we solve it, we will get something like this, which is a sinusoidal term. So this means even if we are giving a DC voltage, the very nature of the inductance and capacitance will make the current look like a sine wave. So if we go back to our diagram, so the charging curve will be something like this, but the charging current will be sinusoidal, because term is this sine term is time dependent. So again, in case of a normal capacitive charging circuit, the capacitor, the maximum charge of the capacitor, or the maximum voltage of the capacitor, doesn't exceed the supply voltage. But in case of an LC circuit, the capacitor voltage can go beyond the source voltage uh, if it is coupled with a thyristor. So why is that so? If the inductor and the capacitor is chosen the right way, even if when the capacitor gets fully charged, the inductor will be still pumping current. And since there is a unidirectional current device, I mean a thyristor, the current cannot go back to the source. So after the capacitor is fully charged, the inductor will still pump current through this capacitor. So in an ideal case, the capacitor voltage will rise to twice as much as Vs. So no matter what the initial condition of the capacitor, so in this case, this capacitor is initially charged in this direction. So if we provide a voltage that creates a current in this direction, the polarity of the capacitor will be reversed, but the overall result will be twice the amount of input voltage. So to sum up the idea, in case of an LC circuit and a thyristor, the capacitor voltage can exceed supply voltage. So this will be helpful in other types of commutation. So in case of a self commutation, the current will reduce to zero or reduced below holding current, and the thyristor will turn off. This is the diagram of an impulse commutation system. So if we open up this diagram, this is not in the book. I have edited this diagram so that you can understand better. So again, to summarize the commutation, the sole purpose of the commutation is to seize the IAK, or to reduce the IAK below holding current. In case of a resistive load, we can do this by simply reverse biasing the thyristor. So that will also work in case of a resistive load. So this is a simple diagram of impulse commutation, and again there are some classifications of impulse commutation, namely load side commutation and line side commutation. So we will discuss that after a while. So if we look at this diagram, the main thyristor is thyristor T1, and these circuits are all extras. In the book, the load isn't shown, but actually the load is connected throughout the entire process. So the load is essential for this commutation process in case of a load side commutation. And here is a diagram of the same or similar circuit that doesn't depend on the load in order to uh, charge or discharge this capacitance or inductance. So again, this is the main thyristor, and the current will be flowing through this thyristor to the load. This freewheeling diode is an absolutely necessary in case of a load side commutation, unless the load is of course inductive load. But in case of a line side commutation, this freewheeling diode is necessary. So again, these are the breakdowns of this impulse commutated circuit. So the main current is flowing through this thyristor T1 through this load, and the circuit is complete. Uh, you can notice this T3 and T2 is disconnected, and the capacitor is initially charged like this. Note the polarity. So in this condition, if we turn on the T2, what will happen? The plus terminal of think the capacitor as a battery or a voltage source. The positive polarity of the capacitor will be connected to the cathode of T1. Since it is charged like this, the positive polarity of capacitor will be connected to the cathode of T1, and the negative polarity or negative voltage of the capacitor will be connected to the anode. So the T1 will be forced to turn off due to this reverse bias. So the T1 will be turned off, and the thyristor T2 is now on, and the current will be flowing from the source through the capacitor through T2 to the load, and the circuit will be completed. But what will happen to this capacitor? As the current is flowing through this direction, the capacitor will be first discharged and then charged back in this opposite polarity. So when the capacitor is fully charged, the current through the capacitor will diminish and T2 will be turned off naturally, because as we have discussed, in order to turn off a thyristor, we need to cease the current or cease the current below holding current. So in this stage, all of the thyristors are turned off, but the capacitor voltage is reversed. Uh, if we go back to our first diagram, this is the initial condition to turn off the T1. So if we leave the capacitance or the voltage of the capacitor like this, the next time we start T1, there will be no way we can start this T2, because even if we start the T2, this negative voltage will be connected to the cathode. Hence, the T1 won't be turned off. So in order to T1 to turn off, we need the voltage of the capacitance to be polarized like this, not that. So we have to do some extra steps in order to reverse the polarity of the capacitor or the voltage of the capacitor. Now, if we turn on T3, then the capacitor will start discharging through T3 and this inductor. Note that the mains voltage or the supply voltage has nothing to do with this step, because the loop is self-sufficient, the capacitor is charged, and the thyristor is on. So the capacitor will fully discharge, but as we have seen earlier, in case of an LC circuit, the capacitor charges beyond the supply voltage. So in this case, the capacitor will first discharge to 0 voltage, and then due to this inductor, the inductor will pump current through this capacitor, and as the flow of current is in this direction, the capacitor will be charged back to this polarity. And if we look back to our first diagram, this is the same polarity to achieve the commutation. So this cycle repeats. So this is an impulse commutated circuit. So if we get back to the topic of line side and load side, in case of a line side or a load side, this charging of the auxiliary components are done through the load. So if we recall the second step, the discharging and charging of capacitor is happening through the load. Hence the name load side commutated circuit. In case of a line side commutated circuit, we can rearrange the same circuit in such a way that the charging or discharging of this capacitance isn't happening through the load. So if we connect this portion directly to the negative side of the source voltage, like in this case, the charging of capacitor or discharging of the capacitor happens independently of the load. So whether the load is connected or not, the auxiliary circuitry will be charged. So these are the differences between line side and load side commutation. You can learn more about the line side commutation from the book, page 69, in the soft copy of the book. So if we go back to our main slide, another type of commutation is, or another technique of commutation is complementary commutation. So complementary commutation is described in this diagram. This is the main circuit of a complementary commutation circuit. There are two main transistors or main thyristors, T1 and T2, and this auxiliary capacitor is used to turn on and off these thyristors. So if we turn on T1 for the very first time, the current will flow through R1 and T1, and an auxiliary current will flow through R2 and this C, which will be charged in this polarity. So now T1 is on. If we try to turn on T2 or give a gate pulse in T2 in this time, this plus terminal or this positive voltage will be connected through T2 to the cathode of T1, and the reverse voltage is already connected to the anode. So the thyristor T1 will be reverse biased and will be turned off. So the second stage of the circuit will look something like this. So after that, the main current will be flowing through this R2 and T2, and an auxiliary current will flow through R1 and this capacitance. Since the flow of the current is reversed, the capacitor, the voltage of the capacitor will be reversed. After the capacitor is fully charged, this link will be broken and the voltage of the capacitor will stay like this. Then if we again trigger T1, then this positive voltage or the positive polarity of the capacitor will be connected to the cathode of T2 by this T1. So the T2 will be turned off and the cycle will repeat. Here is the diagram of what is happening. So if we first trigger T1, the capacitor will charge to a voltage. Since this is only an RC circuit, not LC circuit, the capacitor won't charge beyond this supply voltage. So the capacitor will be charged and stay like this, and the current of the capacitor will diminish after the capacitor is fully charged. So this portion, in this portion T1 is on. So if we turn on T2 in this section, the current will change the polarity, or the capacitor current will change the polarity, and so does the voltage. So first capacitor will discharge to 0, and then it will get back the charge in the opposite polarity, and the cycle will repeat. Since the load is divided by two resistance, these types of circuits are not used in common applications. These are only used in oscillator circuits. If we get back to our main slide, so there are different types of thyristors, but we are only interested in some of these, namely GTO, it's gate turn off thyristor. What are the advantages of gate turn off thyristor? It turns off if a negative pulse is provided in the gate. So it eliminates the need of a commutation circuit. Again, the auxiliary elements like capacitor or inductor aren't required in this type of circuit. So how do we turn off a thyristor? If we get back to our two transistor model, so just a quick recall, this Ig or the positive Ig turns on this Q2, and the Q2 subsequently turns on Q1, and eventually they gets to full saturation. So this latching condition is governed by this IC1. Even if we detach Ig, the IC1 is sufficient enough to drive the on state of these transistors. But if we provide a negative gate current, I mean, if we can drain this IC1 by this branch, this IC1 won't be able to turn on or keep the on state of this Q2. So this is the basic of a GTO. So in order to do so, we need to adjust the gain of this transistor in a very predictable way. So in case of a GTO, this gain is controlled in such a way that a negative gate current turns off this latching state. Another way to do this is by shorting the anode, or so-called anode short. It is done by placing this N-type of material in a regular interval in a P-type material in order to maintain the carrier density in an acceptable state, or in order to control the carrier density, hence the gain of this thyristor. Another important kind of thyristor is triac. So triac is basically two thyristors connected in a back-to-back fashion or antiparallel. So if this thyristor conducts during positive half cycle, this thyristor will conduct in negative half cycle. So if you can recall, a thyristor is an unidirectional device. So if we provide an AC signal to a thyristor, it naturally cuts off the reverse or the second half cycle. If you recall the natural commutation, it naturally denies the reverse portion of the signal. So it rectifies the incoming AC signal. But sometimes we need to drive AC loads like induction motor or ceiling fan by these thyristors. So in order to do so, if we connect an antiparallel thyristor with the first one, this SCR2 will conduct during the second half cycle. And if we control the thyristor by gate signal, or this triac by gate signal, we can have something like this waveform. So the DC value of this waveform is still 0, but there will be an RMS value. And this RMS value will vary according to the area under the curve. So if we shift the area, the value of RMS value will shift. And this very circuit is used in our regulator circuit of the fan in our household. So we change the speed of the fan by varying this RMS voltage, by varying this gate pulse. So this is the basic structure of a common triac. This can be set up in various ways, but this is a common structure. There are two terminals called terminal 2 and terminal 1, and another terminal is the control terminal, which is gate. Note that these terminals are not connected to a single material. For example, this terminal 1 is connected to both N2 and P2 material. So same goes for all of these terminals. So this has some significance. So if we get back to this diagram, this looks basically like this: a PN-PN transistor and a PN-PN transistor connected in an anti-parallel way. So if we analyze the characteristic curve of a triac, it is basically the characteristic curve of two anti-parallel SCRs. The first one will conduct in quadrant 1 and the second one will conduct in quadrant 3. The triac can conduct in quadrant 2 or quadrant 4, but this isn't normally done. The normal operation of a thyristor comprises of quadrant 1 and quadrant 3. So what is quadrant 1? In quadrant 1, the MT2 is kept at a higher potential than MT1, and the gate is also positive. So if we analyze the structure in this case, the PN-PN structure is activated, and this NP-NP structure is reverse biased. So this PN-PN structure is the thyristor 1. So how do we relate this PN-PN structure to this main structure? So in this case, this voltage is positive and this voltage is negative. So the PN-PN structure is PN-PN. This N-type material and this N-type material will do nothing in this quadrant 1. So this is the basic operation of a quadrant 1 triac. So if we provide a positive voltage in a PN structure and a positive current in this P region with respect to this N region, it will act like a normal thyristor, and the current will flow through MT2 to MT1. In case of quadrant 3, the terminal 1 is at higher potential and both the gate and terminal 2 is at lower potential. So in this case, the path will be this PN-PN, this PN-PN. So in order to turn on the thyristor, we must understand the two transistor model. So in this two transistor model, if we short these two bases, if we provide a gate pulse or a positive gate pulse, this will turn on this NPN transistor. If we provide a negative gate pulse, this will turn on this PNP transistor. So if we short these two bases, this structure will act like a triac, because if you can recall, the NPN transistor turns on by providing majority carrier in this p-type material, And in case of a PNP transistor, the majority carrier is electron. So this N-type material is this region. So if we provide electron or majority carrier for this region, this will turn on the entire process. But there is no direct connection to gate and this region. But since this gate terminal is connected to an N-type material, if we provide enough negative carriers or electrons, some of the electrons will pass right through this P-type material without recombining. And if this gap is close enough, this is very likely to happen. So this is the quadrant 3 operation of a triac. So this will be the output of a triac. So what are the advantages of a triac? This is simple, this is cheap, and since the triac is, if you can recall, it can be turned on uh, both by positive and a negative gate signal. So controlling triac would be easy. So these are some of the advantages. And when it comes to disadvantages, sometimes this triggering can be tricky and needs careful consideration because it can be triggered by both positive or negative gate pulse. So this cheap device is used in our household application like light dimmer circuit or fan speed control circuit. So this ends our lecture on thyristor.